It's a Tuesday afternoon. You're at work. You get a call from your personal chef. He's calling in to find out what you want for dinner. You ask him, "What's in the fridge?" He walks over, looks inside, and makes suggestions based on your dietary preferences, in your mood, and the kind of day you've had. By the time you get home, your meal is waiting on the dinner table, all nice and warm. And the chef is charging in a corner. The privileged are already living this way. The only difference is they outsource this to a real person. But a personal robot for the masses doesn't seem that far out. Since the turn of the last century, this is the direction we've been heading in.
Modern equipment speeds up the work, makes it easier and more efficient too.
Automation, derived from the ancient Greek words auto meaning self and matos meaning moving, essentially self-moving. Somehow driving a stick was too demanding, so we built automatics. Anything that can get the job done without human intervention was marveled upon and still is. Every generation finds a way to hand a little more work over to a machine. And every time we do, we free up some time. We love outsourcing labor. Economics always finds a way. But what happens when we outsource expertise? I'm no expert. I'm actually an engineer by profession and have been cooking at home for a decade, mostly by intuition. The food I cook is occasionally delightful and usually edible. Growing up, I spent a considerable amount of time sneaking into the kitchen and investigating what was cooking. Now, as a parent, I have my very own inquisitive trainee sous chef. That got me thinking about how I would pass on what I know, just like my folks did. And I realized there are gaps. And sometimes I couldn't explain why. And that led me to a bigger question. If I am struggling to preserve what I've learned, what happens when a generation opts out of it, opts out of passing on that knowledge? Before we talk about what we are losing, we need to understand what we actually built. According to Harvard anthropologist Richard Wrangham, cooking is what made us human. Wrangham spent 20 years studying chimpanzees in Uganda before arriving at one conclusion. Our brains are 3 times the size of our nearest ancestors, and our guts less than half as large, because we learned to cook. He argues the trigger was fire, and that food was as a result easier to digest, unlocked more calories from the same ingredients, and required far less energy to process. When the gut shrinks, it frees up energy and the brain grows. To me, that's half the story. The other half is what happened around that fire. While people gathered around waiting for food to cook, there was nowhere to be and nothing to do but sit together and talk. Share memories and stories of culture, of land and lore, of relationships and turmoils. all of it may have begun around what was the world's first barbecue. Every human civilization since has begun the same way. Every kitchen table, in fact, is an echo of that original fire. And for most of history, that's where knowledge lived too, only within the people. Not that long ago, if you wanted to learn a new dish, you had to get hold of the person who knew how to make it. Pray they were still around and hope they were gracious enough to share their secrets with you. And then you watched it happen, live, right in front of your eyes, as you frantically took notes. And in the process, you inherited a piece of legacy. Cooking for someone is one of the most direct forms of saying, I see you and I care about your needs. It does this in the most unglamorous way. And when it passes down through a family, it carries more than technique. It carries the memory of being loved. The thing about your palate is that it evolves with time, yet has a certain permanence to it. It isn't really all you're doing. It's a combination of who raised you, where you were born, and what was available and affordable, and whether somebody was kind enough to take what little they had and make something out of it, and then put a plate in front of you. By the time you've grown up, it all comes down to maybe 2 or 3 dishes that will stop you in your tracks. The ones that give you that warm, fuzzy feeling of being a kid again, and you salivate just talking about it. Even the best in the culinary business can't replace that, but they are betting on getting close to it. Close enough so you'll talk about it. Authentic being the keyword they were hoping you would use then. And it wasn't just families teaching authentic ways of cooking. Communities and neighborhoods taught too. Festivals and rituals became anchor points, helping recipes survive the passage of time. Culture has always had backup systems. It is no coincidence that festivals bring out the food we look forward to the most. When everyday life forgets, it's the rituals that remind us. And when they fade away, it's like a factory reset of culture. So if you find a nation having too many festivals and you call that unproductive, probe deeper within yourself. You're probably a victim of over-automation. The oldest known recipes in the world are 3 Babylonian clay tablets held at Yale University, dated around 1730 BCE. They contain about 35 recipes, mostly stews and broths. Ancient civilizations knew that food is medicine and medicine is food. Just the proportions and compositions differed. Was it then that humanity decided to write precise recipes down? The moment humans first committed a recipe to clay was when oral transmission alone started feeling limited, less transferable, or less foolproof when it came to curing ailments. Every medium of teaching since was born out of the same impulse. Let this knowledge prevail beyond me. and enrich it further. We've been trying to pass on what we've learned. I'm sure there will be better systems in the future. I wonder what gets left behind in the process.